Hey dreamers, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Wey. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you found this show. Seriously, you picked a week to show up that I'm going to remember for a long time because today's episode is not like any I've done before. I'm not coming to you with a framework today. I'm not coming with a list of tactics or a step-by-step blueprint. What I'm coming to you with is something a little more raw than that. Something that happened to me over the last couple of weeks that I just can't stop thinking about. And that I knew the moment it happened, I just had to share it with you. So I just got back from Peru and I climbed Machu Picchu with my dad. Now, before you think this is just a travel episode, stay with me because what happened on that mountain and my time in Peru has everything to do with why you're listening to this podcast. It has everything to do with the business you're trying to build, the leader you're trying to become, and the life you're trying to create on the other side of all of that hard work. And so I want to take you there with me. I want you to feel what I felt. And then we're going to unpack what it means for you, for your leadership, your identity, your business together. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's jump in. Well, I want to start before the mountain because to understand what happened up there, you really need to understand what it took to even say yes to this trip and to have this trip in the calendar. Well, my dad and I have been talking about this for a few years. Both of us have big travel goals, different bucket lists we want to hit, and one of my goals is to have really intentional travel with people that are really important to me and create a lot of really great magic moments. And one of those someday conversations that lives in the back of your mind, right next to all the other things you keep meaning to do when life slows down. And you know the ones, right? Someday we'll take that trip, or someday when the business is in a better place, someday when I'm not so busy. But here's the thing about someday is it has no address. You can't navigate to it. And if you're not careful, someday quietly becomes never. And you don't even notice it happened until something or someone wakes you up. And so for my dad and I, this was a conversation that we'd had, a few different times. And I just remember I was having a conversation one day and knowing that if we didn't just pick a date and put it in the calendar, it was never going to happen. And I just remember something shifted in me, reminding myself that if it's not planned, it's not just going to magically happen. And so I remember going home that night, taking a look at my calendar, finding some space on my calendar that would work around work and kids and everything else that we navigate day to day in our busy lives. And we put it in the calendar and it was done. It was booked. And so there was no more someday. And I want to say that out loud because I think a lot of you listening right now have a someday trip, a someday conversation, a someday version of your life that you keep pushing. And part of what I want this episode to do is give you permission to stop waiting for the stars to align because they won't. You align them. So Peru, I want to describe it to you because no photograph has ever done it justice. If you've been to Peru, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Peru is a place that just gets inside you. The colors are different. They're deeper, richer, like someone turned the saturation up on the whole country. The air in Cusco, where we started, sits at about 11,000 feet above sea level. So when you step off the plane, the altitude just introduces itself, not aggressively, but firmly. Like it's reminding you that you're a guest here. The culture is layered in a way that you can feel, even if you can't fully understand it. Ancient and alive at the same time. Sacred geometry in the architecture. Textiles in colors that don't have names in English. And there's a spiritual weight to it that I wasn't really prepared for. And I say that as someone who isn't particularly woo-woo, it has gravity. And so we spent a few days acclimatizing in Cusco as we led up to our big climb to Machu Picchu. We walked in the city, we were eating great food, and really just sitting with the altitude. And we met our guide. Her name is Liz, and she's been leading climbs for over 2 decades. And she's just super knowledgeable, phenomenal, super grounded energy. And she said something in the first couple of days that turned out to really be some of the most practical advice on the whole trip. And she said, in Peru, the mountain teaches. You just have to be willing to listen. And I let that sit with me. And I didn't know at that time how true it would be. So we spent about 7 days going on daily hikes and adventures leading up to our Inca Trail to the Sun Gate, which was our final destination. And so the trail opens up directly above Machu Picchu. And the sun gate sits at about 8,900 feet. And so you're climbing above that to reach it. And the trail is not gentle. It's stone steps carved by people who built an empire by hand. Each step is different, some narrow, some wide, some so steep that you're using your hands. The trail winds through cloud forest, through the mist, through sections where you genuinely cannot see more than 30 feet ahead of you. And that's the thing that nobody tells you about this climb, is it's not just physically hard, though it is physically hard. It's the uncertainty that gets to you, the not knowing how far you've come or how far you have to go. There's no progress bar, no estimated time of arrival, just the next step and the next and the next. And I remember multiple times over our journey over that week where you would stop, or maybe your lungs were burning or legs felt heavy. And sometimes even your brain, which, as you may know, is an extremely unhelpful hiking companion, started doing the thing that it does. Those limiting beliefs that creep in, whispering those thoughts is, how much further? And should we really have done this? And what if we can't make it the whole way? And Liz, our guide, and just bless her soul, we're super grateful to have had her. I just remember her coming up and just saying, just stop looking up, look back. And so I remember doing that. I remember stopping, and I stopped walking, and I turned around, and I just took a minute to look at how far we had come, right? How much of the ground we'd already covered. And it was breathtaking, not in a postcard way, but in a real physical, like something in your heart, something in your chest kind of way. The valley far below us, the trail we'd carved through the forest, and the distance that we'd already climbed, visible and real and undeniable. And standing there looking back at that ground, I just felt something that I didn't expect. Just this immense level of gratitude, pride, and just a clarity that I hadn't had in a few months. Because somewhere in the grind of the ascent, I'd completely forgotten to acknowledge what we'd already done. I was so focused on what was ahead, on whether, we could make it all the way to the top, on the summit that I couldn't see yet, that I'd missed the miracle on the ground beneath my feet. And I just remember thinking that the view from the top is going to be great, but it's the climb that changes us, right? It's in the journey. Is the destination's always amazing because that's what you're working towards, but it's the journey, it's the climb that really challenges us and changes us. And I just remember standing there because immediately my whole body that, it wasn't just the mountain, right? It's not just the mountain that we talk about when we reference that, but it's about every person who's in the middle of building something and can't see how far they've come because they're too busy trying to get to the top. And I just remember standing there, taking lots of photos, taking it all in, and just really looking around and then continuing to climb. And so let's just talk about what this means. The reason I share this story with you is not just as a beautiful travel story, but as a leadership framework. Because I believe every single thing that happened on that mountain in our time in Peru maps directly onto what you're experiencing in your business right now. And I want to give you 4 lessons, 4 shifts in perspective that I'm going to call the climb framework. So lesson 1 is stop looking up. Look back. And let's start where, our guide Liz started with me, the radical act of just turning around. One of the most persistent patterns I see in the founders and business owners I coach is that what I call a, summit fixation. It's this relentless, exhausting, zero-sum focus on where you're not yet. The revenue you haven't hit, the team size you don't have, the version of your business that lives somewhere in the future that you can't see yet. And I get it. I've lived it. The ambition that drives you is the same ambition that refuses to let you rest. The very quality that makes you a builder is the quality that makes gratitude feel dangerous. Like if you stop pushing for a second, the whole thing will stall. Well, here's what I know from over 20 years of leading teams, developing managers, and coaching high-performing entrepreneurs. The leaders who burn out fastest are the ones who never turn around. The leaders who scale with the most clarity, the most confidence, the most magnetism, They have a practice of acknowledging the ground already covered, not as a reason to slow down, but as fuel to keep going. Because here's what acknowledgement actually does. It recalibrates your identity. And when you stop and say, I built that, I survived that, I figured that out, you're not just being sentimental. You're reminding your nervous system of something it desperately needs to hear. I am someone who does hard things. I am someone who figures it out. And I am someone who climbs. And that identity, that is the foundation of every next level. So what's one thing that you've built, solved, or survived in the last 12 months that you haven't fully acknowledged? And say it out loud right now. And I want to share a story with you about a client, and I'll just call this client Jordan for this podcast. But Jordan came to me after 3 years of building a service business, convinced she was failing. Revenue was up 40% year after year. She'd hired her first 2 employees. She'd landed her biggest client yet. And she sat across from me on a Zoom call, genuinely distressed, saying, I don't know why I can't feel good about any of this. And I asked her one question. When did you last look back? She didn't understand what I meant, so I asked her to walk me through where she was 3 years ago, what she had, what she didn't, what she was afraid of. And as she talked, something changed in her face. The tension softened. The eyes got a little watery because she'd been so relentlessly forward focused that she'd never once sat with what she'd actually built. The view from the top is great, but if you never turn around, you never see how far you've climbed, and you never fully become the person who climbed it. Lesson 2, the climb is where the identity shift happens, not at the summit. And this is the one I want you really to sit with, because I think it's the most misunderstood truth in all of entrepreneurship. We have this cultural narrative that goes something like, work hard, reach the goal, become the person, hustle until you hit the milestone, grind until you reach the summit, and then you'll be who you're supposed to be. But that's not how it works. And deep down, I think most of you already know that. The summit doesn't make you a CEO. The climb does. And let me say that in a different way. The revenue target doesn't make you a leader. The decisions you make on the way to it do. The team size doesn't make you a culture builder. The 1,000 small moments of accountability, feedback, recognition, and hard conversations on the way there do. And this is what I mean when I say that scaling a business is an identity problem before it's a strategy problem. The version of you who started your company, brilliant, scrappy, resourceful, doing everything yourself, that version of you was exactly right for where you were. But that person, unchanged, will become the ceiling of your company. And I've seen it happen at 6 figures. I've seen it happen at 7. I've seen it happen to people with incredible products, beautiful brands, loyal customers who hit a wall they can't explain, because the wall isn't external, it's internal. It's them. The business is reflecting back the leadership that's running it. So what does the identity shift actually look like? Well, let me give you 3 specific places it shows up. The first is how you make decisions. Early stage founders make decisions from fear and survival. Mid-stage operators make decisions from logic and data, but CEO level leaders make decisions from vision and values. Even when the data is unclear, even when the path isn't certain, even when the next step is invisible. The shift from fear-based to vision-based decision-making is one of the biggest identity markers I watch for in my clients. Now, the second is how you relate to your team. If you're still in the I could do this better myself loop, if delegation feels like risk management instead of trust and development, you're still operating from a founder identity, not a CEO identity. And the CEO doesn't need to be the best at everything. The CEO needs to build people who are better than them in their specific lane. And that's a completely different relationship to talent. And it requires a different sense of self. And the third is in how you handle uncertainty. The higher you climb, the less you can see. The trail ahead gets narrower, the mist gets thicker, the path less obvious. Leaders who haven't done the identity work need certainty in order to move. Leaders who have done the work can move through the uncertainty because their confidence comes from who they are, not from knowing exactly where they're going. And so here's what I need you to hear is you don't have to have it all figured out to take the next step. You just have to be willing to become the person the next step requires. And that becoming is happening right now. It's in the hard meeting you just had, in the decision you lost sleep over, in the boundary you set that felt uncomfortable, in the team member you invested in even when you weren't sure it would pay off. Every single one of those moments is the climb. Every single one is changing you. Lesson number 3 is you need people on the climb with you. I want to tell you something about the moment that I thought about, self-doubt, where are we going to make it all the way? I mean, I never really wanted to quit the journey, but there are definitely times where you're questioning if this is exactly the climb that you want to take on. And I remember, probably like 2/3 of the way, there was a stretch of the trail that was straight up. And I mean, literally straight up, steep stones, one after another, no landing, no flat ground, just up. And as I mentioned, sometimes our brain is not always the most helpful hiking companion. And you start to worry and, you start to get a little nervous. And I started doing the math at this stage, knowing that I couldn't turn around, but there's a bit of that panic that sets in. And I just remember our group just encouraging each other. You've got this. Look at the view. We just got to keep taking one step in front of the other. And it's fascinating how oftentimes the encouragement that we need isn't really profound, but it's just this presence, this grounded step by step. You got this, right? One kind of foot in front of the other. And I just remember that all of a sudden you're closer and closer and you've overcome some of the harder things or the really skinny paths. But that, when someone else believes in you and you've got people encouraging you, it increases your own belief in yourself, right? And so leadership is lonely in a way that is sometimes genuinely hard to explain to people who haven't done it. And when you carry the vision, when sometimes others can't see it, you hold the standard when the team is tired. And you make the hard call when there's no consensus. And you feel the weight of every person who depends on your judgment or your stability or your ability to project confidence, even on the days you don't really feel like it. And you do a lot of that alone. And that's exactly why the highest performers that I've ever worked with or studied with all have one thing in common. They did not build in isolation. Every single one of them, every leader who has genuinely broken through their own ceiling had people on their climb. Coaches who could see their blind spots, mentors who'd been further up the trail, peers who were in the same altitude and understood what it felt like. Not cheerleaders, not yes people, people who could tell them the truth, hold them accountable, and stay on the mountain with them when the trail got hard. And that's what I think about when I think about comparing leadership and my experience climbing the mountain, is that it would have been really, really hard to get to the top by myself. But having a team of people with me that shared the same vision, that encouraged each other, was what got not just me, but got our whole group there together. And I think about my own journey in business, over, like I said, 20 years of leading teams, millions and millions and millions in sales, 100+ managers I've developed. And I can't pinpoint to a single breakthrough that happened in total isolation. Every inflection point had someone in it. A mentor who challenged my thinking, a peer who reflected something back to me I couldn't see myself, a coach who asked the question that changed the direction. So I want to ask you really honestly, who is on your climb with you right now? Not who is in your corner on social media, not who likes your post, who actually knows where you are on the trail? Who knows what you're carrying, what you're afraid of, what you're building toward? Who is invested in your becoming, not just your results? And if you're struggling to answer that, that's important information, because the climb is hard enough with people. Doing it alone and going after it alone is a choice that will cost you more than you realize. And lesson 4 is the summit is proof, but the climb is the point. And so we made it to the sun gates just as, the clouds were opening up and clearing. And I know this sounds kind of like something out of a movie, but it's exactly what happened. We got to the top, the clouds were starting to clear, the sun was out. And when we crested the final stairs and the whole of Machu Picchu just opened up below us, the ancient city carved into the mountains, impossibly beautiful, sitting there in the sunshine like it had been waiting. And I just remember my dad and I putting arms around each other, taking this epic picture of just accomplishment and just taking a look at this incredible view. And here's the thing I want you to understand about that moment is it was extraordinary. It was everything the photos promised and more. And it lasted, I don't know, 10 minutes before it started to settle into a thing I had done. The view was the reward, but it was not the transformation. The transformation was the climb. And I think about the revenue milestones I've hit in my career, the first 6 figures, the first team I built that really worked. And every single time, the moment of arrival was beautiful, but brief. The high faded faster than I expected. The champagne moment gave away to the next mountain on the horizon. Not because goals aren't worth celebrating, they absolutely are, but because the arrival was never where the growth happened. The growth happened in all the days before it, in all the decisions, the failures, the recalibrations, the moments of doubt I had to push through, and the identity I had to grow into. The summit is proof that you did it, but the climb is who you became doing it. And this reframe matters so much for how you show up right now. Whatever you are on, wherever you are on your trail. Because if the summit is the only thing that counts, then where you are right now, in the middle, in the uncertainty, in the growth edge, is just waiting, just enduring, just surviving until you get there. But if the climb is the point, then where you are right now is the work. It's not the gap before your real life starts. It is your real life. It is the part that is building you. It is the part that matters. So lead well in it and be fully present in it. Stop waiting to arrive because you are not behind. You are on the trail. So I want to get real practical with you right now because as much as I love a good metaphor, I also know you're listening to this podcast because you have an actual business with actual challenges and you need actual tools. So let me tell you what happened when I was gone, and then I'm going to give you a framework you can use this week. So I was away from my business for almost 2 weeks. I didn't have daily check-ins, no Slack messages, no just a quick question calls. I was fully present in Peru, fully. And I want to be honest with you about what that felt like before I left, because I think a lot of you will recognize it. Is it sometimes, it felt a little terrifying, not the trip, the leaving part, right? The act of actually stepping away and trusting that what I'd built, my team, would really hold the standards and would hold things without me standing in the middle of it. And there was a part of my brain that was absolutely convinced something would fall apart, that my team would make a wrong call, that a client would have a problem nobody can solve, that revenue would stall, that everything I'd built was more fragile than I had told myself it was. Does that sound familiar at all? Well, here's what actually happened. Nothing fell apart. My team handled what came up. The systems I built held. A few decisions were made. I maybe would have done things slightly differently, but that's okay. Leaders stepped in and that was fine. They were good decisions made by capable people and the outcome was fine. And I came back to my business that had run without me, which told me something I'd been working toward for years, but never fully tested, is the leadership work is working. Now, I want to be honest. This did not happen by accident. It happened because of years of intentional work in 3 specific areas. And I want to share them with you because this is the work that makes the freedom possible. So the 3 things that made this freedom possible is number 1 is that systems that don't depend on you, not just documented processes, though those do matter, but decision-making frameworks that your team can apply without needing to come to you for every call. If your team can't operate without your input or standard decisions, you haven't built a system. You've built dependency. And the work of removing yourself as the bottleneck is the most important operational work that you can do. Number 2 is a team that thinks like owners. This is one of my deepest areas of focus in coaching, and we're going to go deep on it later this season. But at its core, it means hiring and developing people who take responsibility rather than waiting for direction. People who see a problem and solve it rather than escalating it. People who care about the outcome, not just completing their task. That culture doesn't happen by accident. It's built deliberately through leadership. And number 3 is a leader identity that is not attached to being needed. This is the hardest one because for a lot of us, being needed feels good. It feels like proof of our value, being the person with all the answers, the one the team can't function without. There's an ego payoff in that. And I say that with full compassion because I've lived it. And if you're secretly building a business that needs you to be irreplaceable, you're not building a business. You're building a job that you are a prisoner of. So true leadership is building yourself out of the operational center, not because you don't matter, you matter enormously, but because your highest value is in the vision, the culture, the big decisions, the growth, not in being the person no one can function without. And I want you to sit with this question, okay? The question is I want you to do something this week. Take out a piece of paper, draw a line in the middle, on the left side, write things that can only happen if I do them. And then on the right side, things I'm doing that someone else could do or a system could handle. And just be really honest. And the right side is your roadmap. And that's where your next level of freedom lives. Because if you had to leave your business for 2 weeks starting tomorrow, no calls, no Slack, no checking in, no emails, what would actually happen? Where would things hold? Where would they wobble? Where would they fall apart? And that map, the honest answer to that question is in your next 90 days of leadership work, not the marketing strategy, not the sales funnel, the leadership work. Because until you can honestly answer, it would run. Every strategy you built is on a foundation that only holds because you're standing on it. So I want to close this episode the same way I've been thinking about it since I got off the plane. I came back from Peru different, not in a big, obvious way, not in a way that's easy to explain to someone who wasn't there, but different in a way that real growth is different. Quiet, settled, like something that had been shifting for a while finally clicked into place. I came back more patient with the climb, more grateful for the grounded, the ground already that I've covered, less attached to arriving and more committed to leading well right where I am. And I came back more certain than ever about why I do this work, why I coach, why I built this podcast, why leadership, fulfillment, and growth are not just 3 words in my branding, but they are the 3 things I believe every ambitious person deserves to have at the same time. Because too many people are building businesses that grow but don't fulfill them. Too many are leading teams that perform but feel hollow inside. And too many are hitting the summits that they set out for and standing at the top feeling strangely empty, wondering why they don't feel the way they thought they would. That's a leadership problem, and it is a solvable one. But it gets solved on the climb through the identity work, through the people you bring with you, through the decision to stop waiting to arrive and to start leading fully right where you are. So this season, we are going to go deep on all of this. In these coming episodes, we're going to talk about the identity shift. We're going to talk about culture and accountability and what it actually takes to build a team that think like owners. And we're going to talk about scaling revenue without burning your life down. And we're going to talk about what it means to build a business that is just as exciting on the inside as it looks from the outside. And that's what this is. That's what this is what you signed up for. And I'm so honored to be on this climb with you. If this episode moved you, if something landed, if something stirred, if you felt a little called out in the best way possible, if you would do me a favor and share this with one person, I would appreciate that. One business owner, one leader, one friend who's in the middle of their own climb and needs to hear that the climb is the point. That's how we grow this community, one conversation at a time. Thank you so much for logging in and listening to today's episode. I appreciate you. And as always, continue to go after your dreams. And I'll see you next time on your Dream Coach podcast.